Chapter 6. Summer Days. The early summer days on the farm are the happiest and fairest days of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air sweet, and then fade. Apple blossoms come with the lilacs, and the bees visit around amongst the apple trees. The days grow warm and soft, school ends, and the children have time to play and fish for trout in the brook. Avery often brought home a trout in his pocket, warm and stiff and ready to be fried for supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every day to sit quietly on her stool. The animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay calmly at her feet. Around the 1st of July, the workhorses were hitched to the mowing machine. Mr. Zuckerman climbed into the seat and drove into the field. All morning you could hear the rattle of the machine as it went round and round while the tall grass fell down behind the cutting bar in long green swaths. Next day, if there was no thunder shower, all hands would help rake and pitch and load the hay, and it would be hauled to the barn in the high hay wagon, with Fern and Avery riding top the load. Then the hay would be hoisted, sweet and warm, into the big loft until the whole barn seemed like a wonderful bed of timothy and clover. It was fine to jump in, and perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find little grass snakes in the hay, and would add to the other things in his pocket. Early summer days are a jubilee time for birds. In the fields around the house, and in the barn, and in the woods, and in the swamp, everywhere love and song, and nests and eggs. From the edge of the woods, the white-throated sparrow, which must come all the way from Boston, calls, "Oh, Peabody, Peabody, Peabody," on an apple brow. And Phoebe teeters and wags its tail and says, "Phoebe, Phoebe." The song sparrow, who knows how brief and lovely life is, says, "Sweet, sweet, sweet interlude, sweet, sweet, sweet interlude." If you enter the barn, the swallows swoop down from their nests and scold. "Cheeky, cheeky," they say. In early summer there are plenty of things for a child to eat and drink and suck and chew. Dandelion stems are full of milk, clover heads are loaded with nectar. The frigid air is full of ice-cold drinks. Everywhere you look is life. Even the little ball of spit on the weed stalk, if you poke it apart, has green worm inside it. And on the underside of the leaf of the potato vine are the bright orange eggs of the potato bug. It was on a day in early summer that the goose eggs hatched. This was an important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there, sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know the goslings had at last arrived. The goose knew a day in advance that they were coming. She could hear their weak voices calling from inside the egg. She knew that they were desperately cramped, positioned inside the shell, and were most anxious to break through and get out. So she sat quite still and talked less than usual. When the first gosling poked its gray-green head out through the goose's feathers and looked around, Charlotte spied it and made the announcement. "I am sure," she said, "that every one of us here will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of our friend the goose, she now has something to show for it. The goslings have arrived. May I offer my sincerest congratulations." "Thank you, thank you, thank you," said the goose, nodding and bowing shamelessly. "Thank you," said the gander. "Congratulations," shouted Wilbur. "How many goslings are there? I can see only one." "There are 7," said the goose. "Fine," said Charlotte. 7 is a lucky number." "Luck had nothing to do with this," said the goose. "It was good management and hard work." At this point, Templeton showed his nose from his hiding place under Wilbur's trough. He glanced at Fern, then crept cautiously toward the goose, keeping close to the wall. Everyone watched him, for he was not well liked and not trusted. "Look," he began in his sharp voice, "you say you have 7 goslings. There were 8 eggs. What happened to the other egg? Why didn't it hatch?" "It was a dud, I guess," said the goose. "What are you going to do with it?" continued Templeton, his little round beady eyes fixed on the goose. "You can have it," replied the goose. "Roll it away and add it to your nasty collection." Templeton had a habit of picking up unusual objects around the farm and storing them in his home. He saved everything. Certainly, said the gander. "You may have the egg, but I'll tell you one thing, Templeton. If I ever catch you oking your ugly nose around our goslings, I will give you the worst pounding a rat ever took." And the gander opened his strong wings and beat the air with them to show his power. He was strong and brave, but truth is, Both the goose and the gander were worried about Templeton. And with good reason. The rat had no morals, no conscience, no scruples, no consideration, no decency, no milk of rodent kindness, no compunctions, no higher feelings, no friendliness, no anything. He would kill a gosling if he could get away with it. The goose knew that. Everybody knew that. With her broad bill, the goose pushed the unhatched egg out of the nest, and the entire company watched in disgust while the rat rolled it away. Even Wilbur, who could eat almost anything, was appalled. "Imagine wanting a junky old rotten egg," he muttered. "A rat is a rat," said Charlotte. She laughed a tinkling little laugh. "But my friends, if that ancient egg ever breaks, this barn will be untenable." "What's that mean?" asked Wilbur. "It means nobody will be able to live in here on account of the smell. A rotten egg is a regular stink bomb." "I won't break it," snarled Templeton. "I know what I'm doing. I handle stuff like this all the time." And he disappeared into his tunnel, pushing the goose egg in front of him. He pushed and nudged until he succeeded in rolling it into his lair under the trough. That afternoon, when the wind had died down and the barnyard was quiet and warm, the grey goose led her 7 goslings off the nest and out into the world. Mr. Zuckerman spied them when he came with Wilbur's supper. "Well, hello there," he said, smiles all over. "Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 baby geese. Now, isn't that lovely?" Chapter 7. Bad News. Wilbur liked Charlotte better and better each day. Her campaign against insects seemed sensible and useful. Hardly anybody around the farm had a good word to say for a fly. Flies spent their time pestering others. The cows hated them. The horses detested them. The sheep loathed them. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were always complaining about them, and putting up screens. Wilbur admired the way Charlotte managed. He was particularly glad that she always put her victim to sleep before eating it. "It's real thoughtful of you to do that, Charlotte," he said. "Yes," she replied in her sweet musical voice. "I always give them an anesthetic so they won't feel pain. It's a little service I throw in." As the days went by, Wilbur grew and grew. He ate 3 big meals a day. He spent long hours lying on his side, half asleep, dreaming pleasant dreams. He enjoyed good health, and he gained a lot of weight. One afternoon, when Fern was sitting on her stool, the oldest sheep walked into the barn. It stopped to pay a call on Wilbur. "Hello," she said. "It seems to me you're putting on weight." "Yes, I guess I am," replied Wilbur. "At my age, it's a good idea to keep gaining." "Just the same, I don't envy you." "You know why they're fattening you up, don't you?" "No," said Wilbur. "Well, I don't like to spread bad news," said the sheep, "but they're fattening you up because they're going to kill you, that's why." "They're going to what?" screamed Wilbur. Fern grew rigid on her stool. "Kill you. Turn you into bacon and ham," continued the old sheep. "Almost all young pigs get murdered by the farmer as soon as the real cold weather sets in. There's a regular conspiracy around here to kill you at Christmas time. Everybody's in on the plot. Lurvy, Zuckerman, even John Arable." "Mr. Arable?" sobbed Wilbur. "Fern's father?" "Certainly. When a pig is to be butchered, everybody helps. I'm an old sheep, and I see the same thing, same old business, year after year. He arrives with his 22, shoots the—" "Stop!" screamed Wilbur. "I don't want to die. Save me! Somebody save me!" Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. "Be quiet, Wilbur," said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation. "I can't be quiet," screamed Wilbur, racing up and down. "I don't want to be killed. I don't want to die. Is it true what the old sheep says, Charlotte? Is it true they're going to kill me when the cold weather comes?" "Well," said the spider, plucking thoughtfully at her web, "the old sheep has been around this barn a long time. She's seen many a spring pig come and go. If she says they plan to kill you, I'm sure it's true. It's also the dirtiest trick I've ever heard of. What people don't think of." Wilbur burst into tears. "I don't want to die," he moaned. "I want to stay alive, right here in my comfortable manure pile with all my friends. I want to breathe the beautiful air and lie in the beautiful sun." You're certainly making a beautiful noise, snapped the old sheep. I don't want to die, screamed Wilbur, throwing himself on the ground. You shall not die, said Charlotte briskly. What, really? Cried Wilbur. Well, who's going to save me? I am, said Charlotte. How? Asked Wilbur. That remains to be seen, but I am going to save you, and I want you to quiet down immediately. You're carrying on in a childish way. Now stop crying. I can't stand hysterics. Chapter 8. A Talk at Home. On Sunday morning, Mr. and Mrs. Arable and Fern were sitting at breakfast in the kitchen. Avery had finished and was upstairs looking for his slingshot. Did you know that Uncle Homer's goslings hatched? Asked Fern. How many? Asked Mr. Arable. 7, replied Fern. There were 8 eggs, but one didn't hatch, and the goose told Templeton she didn't want it any more, and so he took it away. The goose did what? Asked Miss Arable, gazing at her daughter with a queer, worried look. Told Templeton she didn't want the egg any more, repeated Fern. Who is Templeton? Asked Miss Arable. He's the rat, replied Fern. None of us like him much. Who's us? Asked Mr. Arable. Oh, everybody in the barn cellar. Wilbur and the sheep and the lambs and the goose and the gander and the goslings and Charlotte and me. Charlotte? Said Miss Arable. Who's Charlotte? Oh, she's Wilbur's best friend. She's terribly clever. And what does she look like? Asked Miss Arable. Well, she has 8 legs. All spiders do, I guess. Charlotte's a spider? Asked Fern's mother. Fern nodded. A big gray one. She has a web across the top of Wilbur's doorway. She catches flies and sucks their blood. Wilbur adores her. Does he really? Said Miss Arable, rather vaguely. She was staring at Fern with a worried expression. Oh, yes, Wilbur adores Charlotte, said Fern. Do you know what Charlotte said when the goslings hatched? I haven't the faintest idea, said Mr. Arable. Tell us. Well, when the first gosling stuck its little head out from under the goose, I was sitting on my stool in the corner, and Charlotte was on her web, and she made a speech. She said, I am sure that every one of us here in the barn cellar will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of the goose, she now has something to show for it. Don't you think that was a pleasant thing for her to say? Yes, I do, said Mrs. Arable. And now, Fern, it's really time to get ready for Sunday school. And tell Avery to get ready. And this afternoon, you can tell me more about what goes on in Uncle Homer's barn. Aren't you spending quite a lot of time there? You were there almost every afternoon. I like it there, replied Fern. She wiped her mouth and ran upstairs. And after she had left the room, Miss Arable spoke in a low voice to her husband. I worry about Fern. Did you hear the way she rambled on about the animals, pretending that they talk? Mr. Arable chuckled. Maybe they do talk. I've sometimes wondered. At any rate, don't worry about Fern. She's just got a lively imagination. Kids think they hear all sorts of things. Just the same, I do worry about her, replied Mrs. Arable. I think I shall ask Dr. Dorian about her next time I see him. He loves Fern almost as much as we do. I want him to know how queerly she's acting about that pig and everything. I don't know if this is normal. You know perfectly well animals don't talk. Mr. Arable grinned. Maybe our ears aren't as sharp as Fern's, he said.